we had to carve out 3 hours to sit with each other each week and eyeball each other. No phones, no bullshit. It's very hard for any four friends to do that anywhere in the world, you know, when you're not 15. So we're very lucky to have this as a place, increasingly capturing little ideas during the week. You're reading books and thinking, what's useful here that I can bring to the table? Spider's learning stuff, John's reading stuff, writing stuff. It's become this sort of focal point for our week.
What's up, Convos fam? It's another Wednesday with your boy, Michael J. Morgan. Hope everyone's week went well. Kind of feel like in a broadcasty mood today.
I'm in one of those moods where I've talked about on many occasions I like limitations, so I'm going to limit myself to 4 sentences tonight. So I better make them.
That's
hit.
1. 3 more.
It doesn't count.
This is the setup.
It's the classic genie
So
thing.
it's
Like, you ready to use your
The
word?
preamble.
So if you don't hear from me very much tonight, it's because I'm doing them intentionally.
Listening. Intentional listening.
Yeah,
But when we do hear from you, it's going to be
it'll hit.
all kinds of fire. Did you see
How many
it?
kinds of fire are there?
Did you see Eduardo tagging back with the 5 fire emojis? If you know, you know.
Yeah.
It's really funny.
That's
I also
funny.
didn't respond to his last message. I'm sorry, Eduardo. I'll get back to you.
You always send such thoughtful messages.
It's been a rough
Yeah.
few days. I got you. I'll be back.
I did his live last week. It was really fun.
Yeah, it was good, man.
It was really good. His first, whatever he's calling his series, guitars.
Playing
and,
guitar and talking something.
Yeah.
It's cool.
It was really fun. It was really, really easy.
I liked
Talking
his
about
little
life,
promo.
playing guitar and talking about life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like it.
His little promo today, playing guitar with the countdown.
Yeah.
It's great.
Yeah, I thought you need to bring him on when you start your lives to do guitar until you get the listeners up and your guest joins, and then he can fade out.
Perfect.
Like he should just do the first 5 minutes with
And now
you.
you could do
Like,
3 people in one.
Like Rivers Cuomo and Sam Harris.
Yes, indeed. Losing my religion.
Yeah.
Rivers
Eduardo,
Cuomo.
if you're down, I'm here for you.
He's down.
He's down.
I speak for Eduardo.
He's your Reggie Watts, or
Yeah, you could tell jokes if you want to.
who are the talk show musicians of?
I know Fred Armisen was playing drums for...
Who was Arsenio's guy? That was a dude. Paul Schaefer. He's like the big famous one with Letterman, and
Yeah,
it's like the musical sideman.
Yeah.
That's a thing.
Yeah. I've been reading this book, and I'm ashamed every time I tell the title because it sounds like the most sociopathic book one could read. It's called People Skills.
Okay.
I just feel like carrying this book around seems weird. But the subtitle is How to Assert Yourself, Listen to Others, and Resolve Conflict.
Those are great things.
Yeah, all great things. It's an incredible book. I'm only like maybe 40 pages in. And
Who's the author?
shout out to Robert Bolton, PhD.
Okay.
Any relation to Michael?
Maybe. We'll find out.
That doesn't count as a sentence.
There's a question. Yeah, you know, as I read it, obviously I'm applying it to my own life, but then also looking laterally, like where can I apply this? Obviously in design, a form of communication, a form of assertion, but also the podcast and listening and communicating to each other. And then what I didn't think I would find in here was its relation to unfuck as well. They're talking about kind of barriers to communication, and one of them being like how the space is arranged and physical objects being in the way of the speaker and listener. And I was like, the speaker and listener, you know, and that being a huge barrier to like understanding and, you know, I even highlighted removing sizable physical barriers fosters better communication. And talking about the desk and how the desk intrudes this interaction between the speaker and listener. And this guy did a study finding that when putting someone at the side of the desk instead of in front, it changed like their conversation and their interaction. So, you know, I know you guys are very anti-desk, and I think there's even more good reason to be. It seems as though it might actually connect people with the music even more psychologically. So that stood out, and I was like, I didn't think I'd find that in here.
Wow,
but
that's really interesting.
another kind of 2 lines that I highlighted that I really dug. I always love etymology, the study of kind of the meanings of words. And here the word listen is derived from 2 Anglo-Saxon words. One word, hilistan, which means hearing. The other is, halosnian, which means to wait in suspense. Listening then is the combination of hearing what the other person says and a suspenseful waiting, an intense psychological involvement with the other.
It's
So
anticipatory hearing.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, speaking, listening, and then, asserting.
I love this anticipatory
Resolving.
hearing. That's such a cool.
That might be a barrier of communication depending on how it's used.
Sure.
But naturally, we are kind of wired to predict and anticipate.
Well, isn't that, when you think about records that engage us or records that don't, that a record that holds you, where the verse is building tension and then the bridge does something where you're like, wait, what? And then the chorus hits and you get the classic arc of a good song. That is anticipatory listening. And then when we get to 12 seconds in, are like, nah, next. It's the opposite. It's like we're not anticipating. We don't care what comes next.
How are you
We're tuned out.
defining anticipatory listening?
It's anticipatory hearing.
Yeah.
Anticipation is built into the word listen.
Yes.
That's what I mean. It's hearing, but you're leaning in, anticipating the next thing coming.
Right.
That's the meaning of that literal meaning of the word.
Yeah, I'm curious about the hearing, listening thing. You know, how we define it. Because hearing to me is something you can't turn off. You
It's
hear
a capacity.
You hear every sound. You listen to some. Listening is a more
It's a
deliberate
function.
act.
Right. There's literally a chapter that I just got up to. Listening is more than merely hearing.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. But I really like this kind of breakdown on the topic of communication from both sides, and just kind of looking at every attribute that goes into it. It's, not something that you're taught in school. Just tons of quotes, tons of areas to dig into a little bit more.
Yeah, those are 2 gems.
Yeah, I plan on going back over this when I'm done and then paraphrasing every highlight I've made, because it's on every page. There's so much here, and I haven't even had the time to fully integrate it, but there's been little bits and pieces that have really stood out. This one in particular, a lot to do with the conversation too, and like our role in listening to each other, our role in speaking, the assertion part. We're literally practicing these skills. So like when I'm hearing in the book, tips, methods, ideas, the kind of breakdown of what we're actually doing. Some of it we've actually discussed on air, and other things are kind of new to me. But I like this quote a lot. I wish I had some way to make a bridge from man to man, but man is all we've got. I really like that.
Say that one more time.
I wish I had some way to make a bridge from man to man, but man is all we've got.
Yeah, language is an attempt to bridge consciousness. I'd like to hear the author expound on that.
This was written by Richard Wright, W-R-I-G-H-T.
Oh, Richard Wright. That's the foreword?
In the book Outsider. That's
a quote. Oh, he's just right. He's
it's a
quoting
quote
it.
to start the chapter.
Richard Wright.
What does that mean to you, Michael?
Well, I think we're always looking for connection, right? And we're trying to connect in all these different ways, through objects, through experience, whatever. But at the end of the day, it's sort of like the realization, the existential realization that you're alone. You're an alone being on a journey, that life is finite. It's like, You literally only have yourself to bridge to any other person. Like that is like the way that you can connect to another person is through yourself. There's no other way.
Or through them, through man, through humanity.
Yeah, and I mean, and
they
the
can
only
reach
way
to
is,
you too.
Right. You're like kind of both building these bridges to communicate. Building these bridges to connect. Communication provides that bridge, and I think what he goes in detail about are the ways to improve that, to kind of increase the bandwidth of communication. And yeah, I mean, it's good. I don't know. There's a lot. I can go on and on about it. It's just, I can go on and on, but I also feel like I haven't retained as much.
It's new.
Yet,
It's
because
new.
it's very new, but it's making me appreciate what I do even more and what we're doing here even more. Because I was listening to Robert Sapolsky's lecture on language, and after that, I was like, wow, it's amazing that we could even understand what people are saying.
Yeah.
And that's just like one piece of this. And then communication in general, just even being able to be in a state where you can receive or where you can speak or where you can assert. That's really difficult. You might have the language, but you might not have the frame of mind or the environment or whatever, right? To do that. And like, you know, when I think about what I do as a designer, I'm basically communicating with no voices, from one person to another, but like the design becomes that bridge. And thinking about all the nuance that goes into communication, it's really helpful there. One thing Sydney has said is how most of the episode I usually don't say much, and then at the end I'll say something. And I'm on this chapter on like listening, and I was like, oh, that's a skill. Got it. Okay. Like that's what I was doing this whole time. But thinking that it's like part of the whole thing. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
Yes.
There's another quote here where, oh man, it's so good. Robert Benchley once said, drawing on my fine command of language, I said nothing. I like that one. That's good.
I was thinking this morning, I walked with Hector. So we had met briefly previously, but he reached out and was like, hey, we should get together and we talked podcast. But I was thinking, not related to the conversation, but I was thinking about how when you meet a new people or you get in a new work situation, like when we get in a studio and we're doing Unfuck or whatever, that there are different modes you can enter, right? You know, one of the modes is kind of a leadership role where you take control of maybe a chaotic situation, or you know, not something we do very often, but you assert dominance. You say, hey, I'm here, I'm in charge. This is chaos or whatever. Or you demonstrate curiosity or whatever, you know, you play with the dog or the child and it shows whatever. But I was thinking about the idea of deliberately doing behaviors to give the other people permission to be better versions of themselves. So leading with kind of the things that you want them to have permission to do. So, you know, we've talked about honesty or openness, or the as yet unresolved, ungrounded word vulnerability. But the idea that when you are open, it invites openness from other people. You're not just sort of unburdening a fact or whatever. You're giving them permission to be similarly open with you if they want. And that sort of deliberate choice in a new situation was interesting to me today while I was driving, sort of thinking about how if you know that you have some trust, or you know that you have confidence in what you're doing, or you know that the work to be done is sort of comfortably within your skill set, that what you want to do is empower the people you're working with so that they can be bigger versions of themselves.
Yes.
I think it was on my mind because of the workshop we did yesterday, Spider, which was really good, you know?
I like the converse of that point, which is if you don't know what you're doing too, it also allows someone else to know. There's a duality to that point. It's like, if you know what you're doing, you want to allow people to feel like they can learn or know, right? That's what you were saying.
More than learn or know, just sort of give them permission to
It sets a precedent.
ask questions or not know something or whatever.
Right. Yeah,
to be however
You're establishing norms in
Yeah.
the relationship. Or
people are
in the
nervous when
meeting.
you come to their studio or
Yeah.
or when you're mastering their record. They don't.
No, I totally get that. I'm saying there's the opposite as well, like going in and leading with something that you don't know as well. You know what I mean? Because I think oftentimes like you can go into a situation where, and I don't know, I feel like we're just primed in this culture that leadership and assertion and dominance is like, they're intertwined. But like this idea of leading by saying, this is something we don't know, but this person can help. You know what I mean? Because they do know.
And that is doing exactly what Rory's saying.
That's the point.
It's setting a precedent to not, we're not fronting here. Like we're cool enough and comfortable enough to admit weaknesses, and that sets a precedent that gives the other person permission to do the same. It's not about knowledge or expertise.
Right.
It's just really about like tone and quality, I think.
Yeah, and sort of just the behaviors in the room, the interactions in the room. Maybe that Julie Galliff piece as well. Julia Galliff, yeah. Her piece about that you sent
Scout
recently.
mindset.
The Scout mindset. That little clip about uncertainty and expertise. But I was just thinking about more the if you're going into a room and you've got work to do, that if your mode, if in your mind, it's like, how can the work will get done, the problems will get solved, the design will be good, or the speakers and the acoustics will be good, or the mix will be good, or the master will be good, whatever we're all doing. If you know that and you're comfortable, then putting some energy resource into sort of lifting up the other person, allowing them to be a bigger, bolder version of themselves, encouraging them to share some of their music, or encouraging them, by you within the first 10 minutes saying, I don't know, when they ask a question, I've never thought about that, or whatever. They don't feel then they have to have an answer. Some people, when we get on workshops, they feel like we ask a question and they feel like, oh, fuck, I fucked up.
Yeah.
I don't know the answer to that.
I've often got like, is that the right answer? I'm like, this is an open-ended question. There isn't one.
Yeah, it was just how was your day?
This is a process.
Yeah.
It's
So,
the equivalent, yeah.
Not disarming, but sort of unburdening people of those sort of feelings that they have to be something or know something or, I've had people write me when I send them a master, I'm like, I love it. Like, I think it sounds really good. But like, shouldn't I have notes? And it's like, you don't need to have notes. It's okay. Or other people apologizing because they have a note. I'm really sorry. But I'm thinking maybe the last chorus could be brighter. And it's like, great, let's do it. Don't be sorry. This is, and you want to take those examples and sort of invite feedback, but not, like we talked before on mic about my old emails used to be, whatever. I used to reference something about notes or whatever. Now I just ask people to let me know how it feels.
Right.
I never ask for notes because I don't want an expectation with a young artist that they have to have a note.
Right. But they will have a feeling.
And I will warn people. I was like, if you share this with your friends, like if it's a young artist and they're obviously kind of a little more naive to the process, I'm like, if you share this with your friends, they're going to feel obligated to give you notes. So you want to weigh that against, if I ask you for feedback, you will say, well, I don't know, the drums could hit harder or something.
Right.
It's like, well, okay, whatever,
Because you want to be someone that has something to say
Of
about
course.
the thing you're supposed to have something to say.
Exactly.
about.
Yeah.
It's leading in a way. I mean,
Yes.
It's like, well, you asked,
Yeah.
I'm your friend. Shouldn't I
As
be
if
doing
I
this for
should.
you? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm thinking about this weekend. I spent the weekend with Addison and Ray, two friends of mine. They're both in a group together. They're working on 4 music videos. They're doing a 4-song EP, and they're doing 4 music videos that all connect. And they told me the concept, and I was like, it's a good music video concept, but like it's not anything that is you guys. You know what I mean? It's not, it doesn't connect with the lyrics. It's not any of the level of depth that we've gone, it doesn't hint at any of that. And I just kind of had it in the back of my head was like, the right time will come where that statement can be, brought into the conversation. And I was over and we were talking about the video, and I was like, I think it would work, but it doesn't feel authentic to your experiences or even what you're singing about on the record. And I think there might be something. I know that there's another idea that exists, obviously. There's always another idea, but it might be worth exploring those other ideas and seeing kind of what lies beyond this very like clear, certain concept. So we got into it, and I very quickly realized that I don't know anything about directing or writing music videos. And so like very quickly, seconds, minutes into it. And I didn't really go in saying I did. I just said, there's a better idea here, or a more honest idea here. And we were talking, and they have a director, and I've met him, and he's a really, really great guy, talented, and he's sort of like filming it, but he's not a writer either. But Addison was like, I feel like we're going pretty deep into this. I'd love to like, maybe we wait till tomorrow to talk to him about it. I don't want to kind of just throw on, here's this new concept. And I was like, let's FaceTime him right now. Like, just let him know. Let him, sleep on it, integrate the idea in his head. Maybe, he'll come up with something. So we FaceTime. And again, knowing strengths, Addison was like, this is not me. Like, he's like, I can't have this. Like, he started talking to him, and he's like, I feel like the way you would frame this to him is better. Like, you're not saying the idea was bad. Like, the way I was delivering it to them even. He's like, can you talk to him? I was like, sure, I'd love to. So we're talking, and I find out that his girlfriend's like a TV writer. And I was like, can she come over tomorrow? Like, can we all just sit at a table as professionals and like really do the right thing? And he's like, yeah, she would love to. And I hear her in the background. She's like, yeah, it'd be amazing. And I was like, great. Like, I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. I just know that there's a more genuine idea. And I trust that you have the skills to pull that out of us. And they came the next day, and like, my role as a leader in this situation was just literally not saying anything. I was just like watching them go, and it was amazing. Like the two of them riffing off each other as a couple. And like, I even stopped just to be like, this is whatever you guys have going on is like unique and special. It's like director, writer, they're coming up with all these ideas. And we got to a place where it was much better. And it long story short, it was kind of rooted in this idea of what I was saying, in that sometimes leadership is not knowing and exposing that early on, like the weaknesses you have. I'm not a writer. I don't want to be or plan to be, but there is someone there, and they can do this really well. And then when you let them, they could do it beyond what we thought was possible. So,
in leading in that moment, you had you had Addison's trust, and his part,
Ray.
Yeah, Ray. So Addison and Ray's trust. You had an intuition that the idea wasn't fully authentic or sort of resonant or truthful in the classic mode that I'm always talking about, and your taste. You had your own taste, which was like, this is good, but not great. Right. But you don't have the skills to build something better.
Right.
And
I didn't want to just be like, hey, like, things sucks. All right. Have a good night, guys.
You facilitated the upgrade to the idea.
I felt like it was my responsibility. If I was to come in and say, this should change, like, I feel a responsibility to then help facilitate that. You know what I mean? And part of that facilitation was knowing what I don't know. And luckily, there just happened to be someone one step removed that did.
Yeah.
But man, it was cool. It was really cool watching like her riff on concepts like just so quickly in ways like that I just didn't have that lens into, or way to conceptualize like moving image and storytelling and that kind of stuff. It was cool. So yeah, now we have 4 music videos all figured out, and they're filming in 2 weeks.
Amazing.
Crazy. People, man. The bridge from one person.
Yeah. The feedback thing there, when to give feedback, and like you say, knowing that, it's interesting. I was thinking about your book, and I was sending you some stuff yesterday by text, and it's like, as we get towards the end of it, I think I'm going to be less and less useful.
Yeah.
Like I see my energy being good now.
Right.
And then later on, it's like, I'm not going to be useful to you. You know what I mean?
I was thinking about that.
Little inputs now to just get different circuits wired in your brain or thinking or energy or whatever.
And that's the concept of Michael's research project, these Instagram lives every week. It's to sort of get people's input at different times.
Right. Before I like solidify the chapters and the topics. And like today I added like 3 new chapters and removed 1. You know, like I'm in this state of like, let me see the scope. I don't know what it is. Like there's a clear mountain and then there's clouds around it. And like as those part, you're like, oh, there's actually 3 mountains. And then those clear a little bit more, like there's 30, you know? And that's kind of where I'm at. But it is interesting about feedback, like when and how and where. And I'm sure they're going to touch on that in this book. I'm touching on it in my book for sure on feedback because, you know, I was thinking the other night, like I was about to watch the Snyder Cut of Justice League, and I quickly sent out the screenshot of the chapters because I was just super psyched, like that I did a thing, and like I'm just psyched with the progress. And there was like a lot of behind the scenes stuff that I had done that wasn't in that image, but in my head it was like encoded in that image. So I just sent it out, not thinking that the logical next step of someone that cares about what I'm doing is to give feedback on said thing. So I'm like on the couch, like Snyder Cut's queued up. I hit play, and then my phone's like zzz, zzz, zzz. I'm like, oh motherfucker! Like this is not what I want at all.
Yeah.
And it's good feedback, and I'm like, Snyder Cut only. Like this is
Yeah.
you know, this is the mode I'm in. But I was reflecting on that today, like I actually created a situation where I was getting feedback at the wrong time. It wasn't the wrong feedback. It wasn't the wrong person. It wasn't even the wrong ideas, but the wrong time was the factor in that, where I was like, I don't even want to act on it. So getting it is like, it's just there. Now it's in my inbox, my text message inbox, to look at a later date and kind of think about and go through. But I don't know, just in terms of feedback, like time is such a huge factor of it. And I think like, you know, if you're like really stressed out or excited or angry or whatever, like just thinking about the other day you gave me feedback and I was in like the clearest, most open headspace. I was at my desk when you called versus laying on the couch, like
actionable,
totally different modes. And, yeah, like my ability to receive it was completely altered. And I think like oftentimes when you're giving feedback to someone, you know, when I was telling that to Addison and Ray, like they were like sitting on their bed. I was on the couch, like they have a pretty big room, like the bed and couch are like next to each other. We're all relaxed, just like had laughed for like 20 minutes. And then I said it. It was, you know what I mean? And it was a mode where everyone was disarmed, you know, it wasn't like a moment of, we like knew we wanted to talk about the video. We weren't like rushing into it. It was like, you know, the right time to do it. Whereas when we were building this wall for the music video and we're all stressed and like figuring out shit in the middle of Home Depot, like probably not the right time to be like, I don't really think the concept's that good, you know, like, cause you know what I mean? Like who knows? We're all frantic at that point. We're like, we don't know what materials we're using now. Like wood costs like $50 a plank. We need like 10 of them. It's probably not the right time to be like, also music video idea, not great. And the wood, $600, you know, like, so yeah, just thinking about feedback and time, I think that's just an interesting sort of attribute that's
so do we need like at the Brazilian barbecue restaurant, we need a little red green thing,
an
you
away
know,
message.
open to feedback, close, little red one. Just post it on your Instagram. No feedback this week, please.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's interesting because, I mean, it's not even this week. It could even be this hour or this moment. Like, I love how on the watch and the phone, if you put it on Do Not Disturb, it'll ask for this event. Like, do you want to be on Do Not Disturb for this event only? And most of the time, I'm like, yeah, that's exactly what I want. You know what I mean? Like, can I just have this dinner not disturbed? But like, see now Reddit is going off on my watch. I don't know why. Got to turn that notification off. But like, you know what I mean? Don't disturb this specific event. But it's like, how do you communicate that? There is no away message anymore like AOL Instant Messenger used to have. And there's no central platform to be like, I'm away, you know, like just now, but I'm, you know, then I'm back. Or I'm at the desk and ready for feedback, you know? So it was my responsibility, and I take full accountability for it. Sending that out with no context to where I was, what I even wanted from the feedback. Like, it was pretty much like the worst version of eliciting feedback from someone that I partook in. But thanks for offering good feedback, regardless of that. And the Snyder Cut was pretty good. So
Cool.
thanks for allowing me that time.
Yeah. That's a hard one. The thing about seeing someone do something and sort of knowing that it's not all there yet, you know, people you care about, and you sort of think, I mean, who knows for sure, but you're looking ahead going, I think if this thing is realized the way they're planning it, it won't be uniquely them, or, you know, I mean, that's what I was asking you the other day is, you know, what makes this book different?
Right.
And you said the fact that I'm writing it, and it's like, well, how is that? What does that mean when it hits the paper?
Right.
What, you know?
Right. No, and you know, in my head, again, so much was encoded in that. I love that question. I think one is like my unique stories related to the themes, right? Then the organization of the book, however it's organized, and the presentation of that book. And then I think there's probably more, again, like I said with the music video, there's always another idea. There's definitely more ways that it can be uniquely me. Something that Ray said was like, if it's written in your voice, I would read it. And then you said something similar, like, how is it uniquely you? And I think me finding my writing voice and connecting that with the voice that I have on the podcast or the live or something, I mean, just that alone, I think even just the pursuit of answering that question is going to make me better. And so that's kind of what I was trying to say, is that just like, but I didn't say it at all because I was on the couch watching the Snyder Cut, was just me doing this, like seeing it from start to finish will make me a better person, and those that read it will take at least one thing away. And that alone I'm happy about. But the pursuit of finding things that make it different and uniquely me is what's going to make it uniquely me.
Those are lasting benefits.
And things that people are like, oh, I never saw that before. Like you were saying, like when you mentioned, can you write the book using only diagrams? I was like, like the visual guy is just thinking only words until you said that. And then I was like, oh, of course I could. Like there might need to be like hundreds of diagrams, but
if every word cost you $1, you'd be very careful in how you use them, you know?
Yeah. I love it because one of the topics is about limitations. And the other day, I've been with Addison and Ray a lot working on this video and just spending just sleeping over, waking up on the couch, continuing work. And like, he was in the middle of writing a song the other day, and I haven't seen him write music in years. We grew up together. So like, I kind of knew where he was and where he's been and whatever, but I haven't seen him write recently. And I was like toying with the idea of limitations. I had just written it down in my notes and something I wanted to have in the book. And, I was like, how can I impose like multiple limitations on him, like during the writing of this? So he like pulled a splice loop and it was just repeating, and he was singing melodies, and like every bar or every like 8 bars or every 4, I would just throw a new limitation for him to like battle with. And like, you know what I mean? And each time it was like, okay, the next time around, like sing the first half of it in a high register and then the second half in a low. And the next time, like do high, then low, then high, then low, like vary it, but it has to continually vary. Just throwing all these different exercises. And we got to like number 20. And then he was like, dude, that's so amazing. Like the last one, we were both like, yeah, this is like the best one so far. Like it connected the most. And it was like, it was because of those limitations that like, and sort of navigating within them, that you realize that like you could actually do anything, you know what I mean? And something kind of lies beyond that first take, the first idea you have. So I really appreciate what you've been doing. I'm throwing these sort of questions and limitations at me because it's easy to not do that on your own. You're just like, let me create as much flow and progress as possible because you want to get the thing out and like realize it, and the idea is there and it's pure and it feels like it came out of you, because it did and it is. but it's through these unique limitations, challenges, prompts, and whatever you want to call them, questions even, that the shape is shaped in a unique way, not just like sort of the same shape that I've been producing my whole life or whatever.
That's the reality, is that, you're not, the book doesn't have a theorem that's never an equation that's never been written. They're not brand new ideas. It's a curated collection of observations and stories and ideas and concepts.
Yeah.
So far there's nothing sort of brand new, super new thinking, like, cutting edge.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it changed, like, it being from you and of you is the most important aspect of it. That your curation of those ideas, your presentation of the ideas, your linking, and sort of the arc of the book, the arc of the journey of going through it and building the understanding, that kind of stuff that's not at all easy to, when you have it all in your head, to assemble it in a way, like it's like when you get a good piece of IKEA furniture or a bad piece, like a good piece, as you build it, it's like, oh shit, this slot's in here, and it feels really good. It's like, oh, this thing goes in here at the end. And when you get some janky piece of furniture, it's like, oh shit, this is not, someone did not think about.
I have to stand upside down to do this?
There might have been a dude who knew how all this went together, but it's not me, So, that's the stuff that I think will make it, it's just like a song where you're like, wait, we're at the second last chorus already? Like, I haven't skipped. You're just being pulled through it by the sort of, the linkages between the concepts or the...
Yeah, and, I think part of this research that Spider noted was like, these lives are a form of research for me. And I think through that as well, I'm sort of just having faith that through that, I'll also discover unique ways of either phrasing things, connecting things, etc. Stories will emerge from that. Even today, I mentioned something to Greg about your relationship with time and how that affects the sort of timbre of how you integrate things. And I just kind of riffed on that at the time, but it was like, oh shit, that's like a big piece, that might be something new. I don't know. So like in the ideas, how can they be new? But then also in the delivery of the book, how
completely
can it be new?
Yeah.
So I'm on that for sure.
Yeah.
I'm sort of in this like info gathering and conceptualization stage. And it's just honestly, at the end of the day, it's really fun and it's enjoyable, which is the best part.
Yeah,
Get to talk with friends and sort through
it's a lot of the stuff we talk about at the table. It's commitment. You've said you're putting out a book, so you're going to write a book.
Yeah.
So when it gets hard, you're going to keep going. You've got all of these social elements to it, with your
Did anyone
lives.
catch that? All right.
What? Catch what?
When it gets hard, you're going to keep going.
Yeah. And you've got the social element and the fact that you're sort of crowdsourcing and drawing, and the sort of, to me, it's like a live gig or a band practice element where you're performing and looking for those new improvisations that can become, how many songs have been written in sound checks, right? It's like you're just sort of warming up, jamming, trying ideas, low stakes.
Yeah.
It's like, you've got 10 people on the live and 100 people will watch it later. You're with a friend, someone you trust, someone who kind of knows you and is pushing buttons in the positive sense.
Yeah.
So it's a good place to try something.
Yeah. And I'm also enjoying, part of this is I'm choosing topics that I want to hear them speak on, so I'm getting to connect with friends in a way that I haven't before. Greg and I have covered the gamut of things to talk about. He's a musician, also in tech, pretty much have clear parallels there, except ours were inverse. He really pursued music while I was pursuing tech. So it's been very cool to kind of have this dialogue over time, but we've really covered the gamut of things. And now I'm getting like really zoomed into specific parts of creativity, and I've never asked him about any of these topics. So I kind of love, and I did this with John for the first time, which is like, what's the topic that is most uncomfortable for you? Like, do you feel like you have like the least grasp on? And then let's start there and kind of through you figuring out what the heck this is, I'm figuring it out or figuring out how to relate it.
Yes.
And I think that in itself, coupled with this book about asserting and listening and it says resolving conflicts, but it's really about when people say like communication, like this book is actually about communication, but the whole of it.
I know
so
you're
it's
not
helping
supposed
me
to
practice that.
judge a book by its cover, but he didn't get any feedback on that cover.
Another
Or
one?
the title. I mean, he really.
I was rearranging it to kills people. You know, that's what I saw. That's his other book that he's writing in the basement.
man.
S kills people.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. He
kills peoples. There you
he
go.
didn't get feedback about the title, you know.
I don't believe that's true.
No, who
Well,
put this out?
You're reading it. You found you. So
Yeah, I was told by someone I trust deeply that it was their favorite book of all time, and that it was their kind of manual to life. So, I said,
high
well,
praise.
all right, then let's go.
Quoting
That's
Robert
good.
Wright in there, he's a dude. He's been on Sam Harris.
Oh yeah.
He wrote a book about Buddhism. Yeah, he's a dude.
So last question on the book. What is the timeline? Very approximately.
Yeah,
Is it coming out this year?
2021.
Mm-hmm.
I'm thinking maybe the next coronavirus wave. I'll finish it when we're all in quarantine again. And the
COVID-23.
vaccine wears off or something. No, I don't have a timeline. I probably should, honestly.
Yeah.
Just to have a commitment to a thing. I mean, it's what I said to you the other day, like about the one sheet. You know, it's like just having the time does make a difference. So I don't know, but let's.
Publishers have been giving
me to
authors
commit to a
deadlines
time.
for hundreds of years.
It's kind of a known.
It hasn't worked in many
but
cases.
I do want to. I want to get. You know, in a way, it's hard to say because I'm like managing the project myself, and I'm in this divergent phase. So right now, it's like having a timeline would be good to say, all right, this is the halfway mark. Maybe it's time to start converging. So there's definitely value there.
You're gonna have to find an editor. This is also fun.
Yeah, it's a whole journey of things I don't know. But I assume you'll just be doing all of that stuff. So
Not me. No, not me.
not me.
I would be a bad editor, I think.
Yeah, same.
You want a Jedi. You want someone who's next leveling all of it.
But right now, I mean, basically the progress is I have a mind map in an app called iThoughts, the letter I and then the word thoughts. It is on my phone, but basically just a map of like what I'm thinking are the three parts of the book, which would be
The three
the
acts.
self. Yeah, the three acts. The self, the work, and then other selves, which I put the work in the center as an idea that this is the bridge, the medium through which we relate to others in the creative field, right? And so having a sense of self, whatever that means, as it relates to creative work, and an understanding of the body, et cetera, the work and the components behind that, and then others, communication, collaboration, those sort of themes, feedback, all the things that come with others being involved in the process. That's sort of the way I have it structured right now, and then just sort of all the topics branched underneath.
Yeah.
But that's today's organization. The other day, it was literally just a list of things, and I was like, you could read it in any order. So
I like that three, whatever blocks or three acts or whatever.
Yeah.
The way and that order, it's good.
seems manageable, and it has a sort of overarching narrative.
But it's something you could tell someone in an elevator. So what's the book? Well, it's about, creative work.
The creative self.
Starts with the
and
person,
other selves.
goes on to talking about the work, and then how the work relates to other people.
Yeah.
Like done, boom, third floor. Have a good day.
What if you called it People Kills?
Don't forget the pre-order.
Yeah, exactly.
Don't forget to like and subscribe.
Yeah.
And that's the other part, the medium. I was like, is it a book? Like, does it have to be a book? Like, is that the right medium? I mean, some people read books. I do. I know people that do. But I know at one point you asked me, could it be a YouTube channel? Could it be something else? And I
Or
thought,
should it
all
be?
the
Could it
above.
be? Yeah. Well,
or yeah.
there's you think about like we say, writing is easy, thinking is hard. The quality of the thinking that you're doing and the work you're putting into understanding these concepts, relating them, distilling them, connecting them, you know,
Organizing them.
organizing,
Jesus.
yeah,
Mhm.
diagramming them, you know, culling stuff that doesn't make the final cut. So then you have a body of thought, and writing, you know, is clearly a way of organizing that. But then you've got to choose how you can either get paid for it or maximize the amount of connection,
Right.
or set yourself up for the next act of your creative life. So, you know, we've talked about you wanting to be more of an educator.
Mhm.
So clearly this level, like if you go on YouTube, there's a lot of videos about a lot of things, and there's not that much, the percentage of stuff that's well thought out, that's
Right.
rigorously done, that's grounded in real, you know,
Something.
effort,
Real anything.
thought, you know,
Yeah.
knowledge, skill, it's much less, right? So if you bring it there, there's a good chance you'll get traction and you won't get any money. So it
Yeah.
leads to what? You know, what does it lead to? Does it lead to a book then that sells 10,000 copies out of the gate because of the Seth Godin style, because of the audience, the loyalty, the trust you've built?
Right.
So, you know, it's not an isolated decision. It's also a part of like your arc, the body of thinking, because it could be the best series of Instagram posts ever.
Right.
It could be YouTube. It could be some new format. It could be a pop-up book. It could be a regular book. It could be a Netflix series.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
So there's the
Could be a course.
a course, workshop, modules, any of those things.
Yeah, once you have it organized, I mean, the form can be
Right.
many things.
Yeah.
And you want the form to serve where you're headed.
Which is another chapter, form and function.
Who are you reaching? You know, there's
Yeah.
a lot of reasons to shape it in different ways. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like a lot of my life. So I've actually written a book before. I wrote one in college. My senior year, we had like a senior project, and I was like, well, every designer had to create a senior project, and some people made a comic book or a surfboard or something, and I was like, I want to give back to the freshmen that are starting this year.
Wow.
And I'm going to make a book about everything I learned throughout college. And then, again, not design tactics, but more strategic things as a designer in school for design, things to note. So I wrote that and then kind of gave it a whole brand. And like, that was like the design portion of it, you know, published like the book, and then, you know, bookmarks and calendars and whatever, like kind of additional stuff, just because it was part of the project. You had to have additional things that kind of fleshed out the brand. But I totally forgot about it. And then I told Ray about it the other day, and she's like, you should read it. So I'm like on the couch about to go to bed, and I was like, oh yeah, I should read it. So I go to Dropbox. I have all the stuff organized from like the beginning of time, and open up the PDF, and I'm reading it. And I was like, oh shit. Like my mom and I wrote this book together, and I totally forgot this. Like, you know, it's one of these things that you block out, you know, trauma kind of blocks it out. And, you know, the last page is dedicated to her. She didn't pass at that point. It was dedicated to her because she literally sat aside. She was my editor. I mean, I would show her the paragraph. Each one was like a little mini essay with like a graphic next to it. And she would just go through it and like kind of cull through it. It was unreal. It was a really surreal experience that I was like, oh man, like we wrote this together. Like I remember her sitting right next to me, dog on her lap, pointing at my screen, picking apart all the different things and what I was saying, and for all her flaws and sort of a lot of trauma that she caused, being someone that didn't have people skills per se, you know, and had a very difficult way relating to others, you know, that was definitely a strong suit, and it was an amazing collaboration between us, and it produced work. When I read it, I was like, damn, this is good. Like this is pretty good.
Wow.
But yeah, it was nice to have this like artifact that my mother and I did together. I thought that was kind of unreal. I was like, man, like we have this thing. So I don't know.
Isn't it
really
amazing
nice.
that we can do work at that level with someone who's gone now and just forget it?
Yeah, that's what I mean. Yeah, it's like,
you know, it's kind of incredible. You know, I have these stories in my mind of things I did with my dad, and it's like I think about all the ones I've forgotten, because the ones of course you remember, you
are usually like the ones where she's like, you know, beating the crap out of me or something. You know, it's like, it's unfortunately like these negative instances, you know, we're kind of wired for, I forget what they call it. Like you're wired to kind of
negativity bias.
Yeah, there you go. And, and this was such a positive thing. It was really nice. And but it's so true. Like there's so many positive moments that we forget. And I think journaling helps with that. And like just kind of taking a moment to reflect on things as they're, after they've happened, kind of as a way of maybe having a shot that you might remember it, or just keeping a good Dropbox, keeping it clean, and, you know, having a friend encourage you to do something you wouldn't normally do.
Yeah, I'm failing on the Dropbox thing anyway, so that's not going to work. Maybe try the journaling
There goes
thing.
your memories.
Yeah. I did delete like 500 things in my Dropbox the other day, and it still got 500. When you work with
imagine what mine looks like.
other people, like you know, there are literally 500 folders in my Dropbox called for mastering, to mastering, mastering, mixes for Rory stuff. And it's like, guys, we got to do better than this. When you send me a folder, we got it. There's got to be a way.
Yeah.
There's got to be a way
Well,
here.
you need a standards guide.
Yeah.
Yeah, protocol. Yeah. Delivery guide.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I forgot where I was going with this, but yeah, I was saying I wrote a book.
You wrote a
before.
book already, yeah.
What was the college book called?
It's called Designology, the study of design. Super lame. I'm not really good at naming things. I should
Designology.
Yeah, it was cute.
Oh, that's
It's cute is what I would call it.
okay.
But not great. Yeah, wasn't a fan. I still am not. And that's probably why I've blocked it out, because I was like, that's so lame. But the content was really good.
The right title will come to you eventually.
Yeah.
It will.
And I'll re-release it.
Yeah.
But that was that book. Yeah, titles are really hard to come by. Names of
Naming
things.
things is
It's
hard.
a real. I mean, there's literally agencies that specialize in just that. I'm sure they do identities as well, but you know, naming is a big piece.
Yeah, it always fascinated me how much could be contained in a tiny little name.
Yeah, it's a lot. I was listening to the author of Freakonomics the other day on Peter Attia. He was actually, did you listen to it? I found him remarkably uninteresting. It was really interesting to me how uninteresting he was. But anyway, he was talking about, he's clearly a very high achiever and very bright guy. But the interview was very telling in a lot of ways, actually. But he was talking about bringing the name Freakonomics to the publisher. They signed a huge publishing deal. They had an excellent manager, lawyer person who negotiated this killer advance. And when they brought the book and the name Freakonomics, the publishing house was like, no.
Yeah.
Just no. This is awful. No.
What about people skills?
But it and obviously that book was a smash. So,
I'm pretty sure Pentagram designed that book.
Yeah.
Pretty sure.
Yeah.
I mean, that's Freakonomics is a pretty extensive brand at this point.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a great name.
Yeah, it has
One
worked.
of a kind.
Yeah, and
Designology. Think about it.
it's identifiably
Sit
sort
with
of
it.
punk rock in
Designism.
a very stiff discipline, Design anoscopy.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah.
No thanks.
Yeah.
That hits home, man.
Hey.
Well,
What else you got in your notes there, Rory?
Let's see. what I've got in my-
You've got such a fertile note taking life.
I've been making more notes. I during the week because the girls are out of town, I watched a bunch of masterclass, and I watched all of Frank Gehry's masterclass on architecture.
yes.
And Spider was sending me stuff, probably sending me Julia's stuff, I think maybe that night or whatever. We were back and forth or something. And, but I really got a lot from it. It was really interesting to just watch someone in an entirely different discipline and how unaffected he was, how he would talk about these important iconic buildings and in the most down-to-earth language. And he would say, well, we took this bit and we sort of curved it. And there's no big sort of oration about why and how it connects to the sort of emptiness of man. It was just like, no, we took this line and bent it a bit.
Yeah.
Because it sort of had a nice thing to it.
Yeah.
And, he's talking about that tower in New York they did. It's like, he described these folds to the, in the waves in the titanium skin to this gal. He said he couldn't remember her name. This gal who was working for him, she's great. She's gone now, but she's great. And he's like, I described them to her, had a little story about the types of folds, and they showed the sculptures that inspired it. And then she did it, and he came back in the next morning. He's like, yeah, that's it. It was all very grounded. I found it very inspiring, but I got a lot from that. So yeah, I've been taking more and more notes as I go,
Have you been to the Disney concert hall?
Yeah, not inside it.
Just outside walking around, yeah.
I'd like to go to a show there.
We should do something about that.
About?
Eventually. I mean, we should go.
Yeah.
We should go. I mean, it's right up the road.
Yes.
Yeah, when Ross was in town, he studied architecture. He's a really close friend of mine. We've known each other since we were, I think, 5 years old, maybe. Kindergarten, so whatever age that is. 4. He ended up studying architecture, and when he was in town a few months ago, we went and just walked around the outside and like hopped over some things to like see better views. One thing he had mentioned is that like pretty much all of Gary's architecture like has like fundamental flaws in it. Like they're like continually replacing stuff, and he's basically doing things that like it's like not permanent, like the way it's being constructed. Like it and it's kind of an interesting thing to think about. Like he was just optimizing for beauty and optimizing for a piece that exists in the world that feels more human and is beautiful and interesting. And when optimizing for that, he's not necessarily optimizing for like longevity. People will preserve it, I'm sure, but like their focus is on different things.
Yeah,
and,
not keeping the rain out.
Yeah.
Stuff like that.
Yeah.
He's not only serving sort of pragmatic stuff like budget and repairability or durability or whatever. He's
it's actually quite controversial because when you have to tear down buildings, it's quite an environmental impact and very costly. There's a whole controversy around modern architecture and this sort of failures, sort of structural failures and this sort of thing.
It is interesting because the other side is like how much it brings in, how many people it brings in and all of that. It's like, know, not saying that, we can hurt the environment as a result, but the function it serves in a city or culture. I mean, Bilbao is something because of architecture.
Yeah, these cities are
fascinating.
Yeah, it's very powerful. One of the things he was talking about this building in New York is the work self-referential and iconic, or in conversation with its surroundings. I thought that was really fascinating.
That was something I gleaned from Ross when he was studying architecture. Like everything is about seasons, time of day, light, reflections, people inside of it. It was like all about the use and nature's use of the structure. And it was just something that like your job is so centered around context and understanding it that it's like it changes your worldview, obviously.
Yeah,
if
very
you're practicing
outward looking,
that all the time.
I mean, the Greeks developed this. Like, Greek and Roman architecture was embedded with this grammar of nature and shadow and use and all of that. Yeah,
and the golden ratio thing was them on a quest to understand if God, like what God's pattern was, like if there was an inherent mathematics to like the creator of the universe. And so that's where they kind of found, like they saw these repeated spirals throughout nature and we're like, well, this must be like the thing, like this is God's number basically. And like, let's model our buildings and architecture to that shape. One, to honor God because they were super religious at the time, but also because they believed it was like the perfect form, which is interesting because it's like if you tell someone that, then everyone's like, yeah, of course, it's perfect. Like it's perfect form. It's used God's numbers, like, but like how that changed perception. Like you could find tons of memes online of like things like in the golden ratio, like someone like on a toilet. And it's like a golden, like whatever. But that was sort of the history of that. Fractals and those things are all related.
Some of these notes are really profound.
Oh,
I just found this one that says, honestly, I'm still on the fence about harmonicas. It's like,
Oh, that's great.
and then right
Shower thoughts.
right underneath that is Kotar Syndrome, where people believe their body is dead and demand to be buried. It's like those two things live. Like,
Is that real?
yeah. It's,
What is it?
Kotar.
Kotar?
I think it's Kotar is how I found it. I think I wikied it at the time.
Wow.
Um,
So people were like, I'm dead.
Is that a real thing,
and
Graham?
yeah, it's a mental illness. Yeah.
Wow.
Um,
I mean, at least one person has to. We live in a big world. Someone has to think they're dead.
Yeah, this is crazy. Looking into my last couple of months in my brain, there's a lot. There's a lot of stuff.
oh, man. Pretend that you're dead. That was a song. Pretend that you're dead. Was that L7? It's grunge.
Yeah, it
It's
could
a
have
girl
been.
band, I think.
That's
from
right,
the-
yeah.
Pretend that we're dead.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Look at all the cultural impact they've had because of that. Now there's a whole syndrome.
Yeah, see, there was a whole Lollapalooza. There was a whole thing that happened.
Yeah. But that masterclass thing was really interesting, and because the house was quiet, the girls were out of town, I had the time to sort of just really watch it and take notes. And when it inspired me, I could stop and think about it and write a note and press play again. And
I've been thinking about you alone. Just imagining you alone. Sometimes looking through your window and stuff.
Just checking on me.
Yeah, just making sure you're all right. Have you it's probably been a minute since you've been alone.
Yeah.
How's that going?
Good. Yeah, it's good. I miss the girls, but it's good. It's good to have, the first, like I said to maybe Spider last week, is like the first 4 or 5 days whenever they go away, is always you imagine in your mind, it's like, I'm going to have time to read a book but really you just have a bunch of shitty work you got to do that you're behind on. And then you're just left with your own shit without the distraction of happy kids or a nice wife, So it's like, you're sort of, usually the first 4 or 5 days I end up in more of a funk, but then you sort of, at the weekend I cleaned the house completely and sort of got it because it had been a bit chaotic since they left.
Yeah.
And that was really good. And since then I've been enjoying the space and sort of been in touch with them a lot, doing a lot of FaceTiming and videos. And
some of those videos you sent.
They're perfect. And so it's been really good. It's been good. And the last couple of conversations we had on mic, sort of integrating those and thinking about, even just this morning, talking with Eduardo on the live the other night about that, talking with Hector this morning, when we walked. And that was great. I mean, it was just a real gift from the conversation. It's just like Hector reaches out and it's like, hey, I listened to the podcast and kind of I like the way you think. You think we could get together? And it's like, sure we can, of course, You're already trusted by Dale, you're in the circle,
Right.
So it's like, of course. So we just arranged to meet at 8:30 this morning and we walked hard, for an hour and 45 minutes, or an hour and a half, something like that. Just went, hard and it was good. It was really good. And we just got into it about work and detailed stuff about life and plans and plugins and workflows and art and service and, all of it. It was really good. So yeah, I think the time alone has been not always enjoyable, but very useful and healthy.
Ain't that the truth? Not always enjoyable, but useful and healthy.
There's an appropriate amount, I think.
Yeah.
You want to be, and most people, I think, in the last year have had too much.
True. True. Any sort of rediscoveries or new discoveries about yourself with the time alone, kind of having that space?
I don't know. I mean, nothing.
Nothing. I'm talking the smaller nuanced things, even.
I don't think, nothing new, just the space at night to kind of, to not be on with other people, not be sort of in that sort of tending to other people's needs and being available to them emotionally.
Yeah.
You just have time to sort of kind of rest more. It's more restful. So, that's been good. And just the time to think, more, today I had to work at home to finish a project, but in the afternoon, it's like, or after the walk, I took a bath. And then in the afternoon, I took like a 20-minute, not quite a nap, but like a, whatever we're doing, these 20-minute like power downs, set my timer, and it's like, it's a quiet house. Like it's, normally that's like very unlikely to be uninterrupted by something.
Right.
Someone, who needs something. So those things, it's nice, and the girls are having a good time at the beach and getting a lot of outdoor time and seeing their grandma. So it's healthy. It's healthy all around, and I'll be very glad when they're home. But mostly I've just been sort of chewing on the work stuff and the ideas around that and sort of reconnecting with things that I'm excited about and being more mindful of some of the pitfalls we've talked about and still thinking about this feedback thing and thinking about this judging thing and that we talked about some in the desert, It's like, when is it appropriate to tell your friends that their music video is not 100% there? And when do you stop? When do you say, it's not 100% there, but I'm not going to say it?
Right.
It's an interesting question.
Right.
Because we're all surrounded by people who are making records or, mixing records or doing things, painting paintings or whatever. And you have a choice of whether you say, of what you say to them,
right.
how you encourage, how you give feedback or...
Yeah.
So that's been on my mind a lot.
I love that thread, by the way. I mean, just thinking about sort of the amount of feedback that's been given over the last weekend to each other about different parts of it. Like, and we can dive into a wormhole about feedback. But I think like part of it is kind of, you're always like testing the waters in some way, because if timing is a factor, you need to know what the right time is. So like in a way, it's not like tiptoeing, like being nervous, but it's like you're trying to get a pulse of like, okay, heart rate accelerated. Is that the right time? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Calm state.
There's that. For me, it's a bigger question is more, do I have permission or buy-in? There's different standards for different things.
Yeah.
Salmon. My dad is a salmon fisherman. My mom cooks great salmon. I've had the best salmon since I was a kid. But when John cooks salmon and it doesn't meet his grade, I'm like, I had a nice meal with friends. Like I'm just about to roll with podcast.
Right.
Everything here is a gift. So John's...
I was going to make you salmon tonight.
Yeah, next week for sure.
to make up for the failed attempts.
Yeah, we'll do it for sure.
Makeup salmon.
That was the plan tonight.
Makeup salmon.
Nothing's better than makeup salmon.
Yeah. You get in a fight with the salmon and then you make up.
Funny you mentioned it.
But so like there are areas where now, do we want John bringing his salmon standards to, I don't know, my grandma's house and coming in and being like, hey, or my mom, like John comes to Ireland and he has an opinion. Like, do we want him bringing that rigor to my family dinner table? Probably not. My mom's been doing the salmon the way she does it forever. It's good. And so, I have areas in my life where I have very high standards and areas where I really don't care very much at all. Like I was talking to someone the other day about, maybe Eduardo, about my TV is not calibrated in any way. I don't give a fuck about the colors on my TV.
Yeah.
Like it's not fucked up. Done.
Right.
That's it. I have I don't care about it at all. And if you swap my TV for one that was worse or smaller or bigger, I'd be like, cool.
Yeah.
Not bothered.
Same.
And then other things, I care more than most people. So in order for, let's say we're talking about records or songs or sonics or whatever, if we're talking about truth and beauty and these things, then do you want my feedback? Do we want to go there? And who really wants it? Who do I have permission from to give it?
Right.
So that's a bigger question for me than when.
Yeah, after the record's on title, it's not the time.
Yes.
Unless you're talking about future work and you're referencing something.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's still when. I think it's always when, because we're always existing in time and every day we're
for me, it's much more
recontextualizing
if
things
than when.
Yes, definitely. Well, the if is answered yes or no by all of these underlying factors. You know, the subset of like timing, person, topic, knowledge and topic, their knowledge and topic, like just like infinite things. You know, mood, relationship, etc.
Yeah.
But if is the question, and I think, yeah, the fact that you're even wondering it is a step forward, because I don't think people are often thinking like, should I even give feedback? Is it?
Oh yeah. I mean, yeah. I think about it all the time. The answer is mostly no.
Also,
Almost
like all
always no.
the feedback books are like, ask people if they want feedback. You know, like
I was going to bring that up. I've been asking a lot recently, and I ask questions in the email along with the mix to elicit feedback, because I don't know if it's done unless there's feedback. There's no sense of understanding if something is at a phase of acceptance without feedback. And the feedback can be simply what you were talking about earlier, that there's just no notes, or do I need to have notes? That's feedback.
Yeah.
What kind of questions? Like, do we love it? What are the questions?
Who's the goat?
hey, I did a thing here. I felt you were going for this. Let me know how this feels to you.
Yes. Yeah.
It's usually about a feeling.
It's not not very leading either way, is it?
No.
I'll do that.
No. It's very open and feels collaborative.
And
I think
neutral.
I talked about this on the Anatomy of an Artist podcast with Verite, that one of my favorite experiences with feedback was Aaron Forbes. Apparently was kind of really turned on and almost confused by the way that I tried to elicit feedback with this question of how does it feel? And Kelsey told me that like that language made him really excited to give me feedback.
Wow.
And it really opened the door to like, oh, he cares. And like,
Yes.
I really do. So it's the language that comes naturally to me, which is I really care how you think it feels, because I think it feels good. And sometimes I'll say that, like, I think what I did feels good. What do you think? You know, and if you don't, here's what I did, so we can work back from there or take it further. There's like it's a collaborative messaging technique that makes someone feel comfortable giving their feedback versus, yo, what up? Here's a mix.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, that could work, but then you're giving no prompt and you're not priming anybody for anything positive. It's just, well, let's see then, like just open air. It just feels like a void.
I got a project one time back from mastering, and the project arrived with the invoice, which to me is so the first master comes back with the invoice and it says, we're done here. And it doesn't invite. Now, it's very efficient, of course, and it needs to be paid and all of that. It makes sense. But to me, it's just like, even if the invoice arrives later that night, you know, it's like the art is here. We can continue this art conversation, and then the invoice comes later. But, you know, so those kind of little cues, that's, you know, if I make a comment, it's going to be something like, you know, on the last track, it's a little lower and darker because the track had this vulnerable thing that I really liked.
Exactly.
So it's a little way of tipping your hat and saying, I heard you.
I heard you.
And then the same thing, like, I'm feeling good about it. Let me know how it feels to you.
Yeah.
That's like the extent of, and I very often will write the things I'm worried about track 7 because I had a hard time with it because it's from a different mixer and then I'll just delete it all and say, let me know how it feels.
Exactly.
I never send it with any of those caveats because if people can hear it, they'll comment, and if they can't hear it, they won't comment, you know, and they didn't need to be hipped to it.
I love feedback.
I really like John's approach. To me, it simulates in the room dynamics. It's like you're bridging the gap over the internet and setting a tone that is sort of the way people naturally collaborate in the room. It's not really like, let me sit and judge what you did. Like, that sort of doesn't happen when you're in the room together.
Yeah.
I had the privilege of mixing last week with Ingmar.
Oh, wow.
There's a project that my manager, Nathaniel, is kind of helping develop with Finn. and Ingmar's doing the mixes. But one song he just wasn't nailing, and I was like, oh, let me just jump on this one. We'll do it together. It had this Afro beat kind of thing. I needed to have the bass loud and distorted, and then like everything else could take its shape. But you just needed to figure out how to get enough headroom to make this record bounce with the bass. And I just went hard for 2 hours, which is not really like me. I usually take breaks, but it was just like a 2-hour head down. And then at the end, I was like, turned around, like, what do you think? You know, just like genuinely like curious, because I should have done it after 45 minutes, but I did it. I think it was, I might be exaggerating, maybe it was an hour and a half, but then he was like, oh, I love what you did here. I think you went a little too far on this. Like, what if we pull back the faders on this thing, this move? And then just because I looked directly at him, said, what do you think? And was open, we got somewhere further. Like, took it down in the output a little bit, so it didn't clip as hard as I was going. Just like perspective that I was just head on throwing things. I think I talked about it on Live with Matt Rad, where it was intentionally the bass was like 60 dB too loud, just so I could feel the record with the bass blown out, like the African records we like to listen to, you know? Yeah. Knowing at some point it was going to be lowered. And like, it wasn't lowered that much, to be honest, just because it felt good. But then, you know, in listening to the feedback from Ingmar brought perspective into the equation. I was like, oh, it's a little too far. You know, maybe we should turn everything down, but keep the balances the same. I thought that was interesting. Like, I wouldn't have thought to do that. And it was an Ingmar thing. Anyway, just there's ways to instill collaboration and feedback in the room that is comfortable and open. And, I'd like to do that with you guys right now. So I was inspired. Michael's writing a book. And I've been quiet this whole episode, but I wrote a poem.
This is your last thing, you could say. You're on 5.
Did I? Did I hit it?
This is it.
Did Michael Bolton count? That comment didn't count. I wrote a poem.
Okay, do it.
I wrote a poem that's inspired by David White and his series on the Waking Up app. The last poem I wrote was about compression. This is going to be a little bit more grim.
Little heavier.
A little heavier. And then I would like to elicit feedback, because this is a first draft. There's been no editing. I just wrote it stream of consciousness.
It's a live feedback session.
Sounds like the thing to do with the
Sounds about
theme
right.
of the conversation. I'm a little nervous. I've never read a poem out loud, and David White is so good at what he does.
Crazy.
Usually at open mics, we snap. I don't know how to snap. So if you
What is
guys
snap?
could
What does
fill
that
in,
mean?
when he has a good
Snaps?
bar, you like snap.
Let's wait till the end.
Already?
It's very short.
Is that a thing?
Yeah, it's a thing.
It's
That's
very.
definitely a thing.
It is. It's yeah. It's in slam poetry.
It's awesome.
Poetry thing.
Because you don't want to
Etiquette.
clap midway during someone reading.
Okay.
That's hilarious.
I've never
Can
done
you
this.
snap?
I've never done this before.
You got Graham? You want to sub in for me with
It
the
doesn't.
snaps?
It
We
doesn't
don't
feel
need
appropriate
snaps.
here.
We don't
Yeah.
need snaps.
It's part of the feedback.
Unstable. We try to etch in stone our marks on the stone road, cobbled and unstable. Unstable is the road I've chosen this time. Unstable is the road I've chosen this time. This sunset leaves ash on the moon, and its crimson turns black. From here we only see the largest craters, each crater marking a milestone on the stone road. Each crater marking a milestone on the stone road. Climb out and remember that potent smell of white roses and lavender. Is it even worth having a sense of smell on the moon, giving a false sense of stability? There's way more to see from way up here. There's way more to see from way up here.
Okay.
I dig it. I don't understand it, but I dig it.
Yeah. Well, my first thing is that usually I read the poetry and I'll like go through it and see how the lines are divided and stuff like that. It's hard to visualize it for me. I'm definitely a visual learner.
You would prefer to read something off of a page yourself?
Yeah,
as-
like I pretty much have to. Otherwise, it's like things just.
I tend to
evaporate.
listen to his poems like 8 times in a row because of that reason.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know?
And like
He's got very particular delivery.
yeah.
when you're a poet, you're choosing where the lines break, and those mean a lot.
Yeah,
yeah.
I only did a few of those like in the first draft,
Right.
like the punctuation.
Yeah.
there.
And then
Reading it out loud and never getting to read it out loud is actually really quite difficult because the breaks don't
yeah,
really correspond unless you punctuate, which I didn't punctuate.
that's
Yeah.
how I kind of do when I'm writing. Like I'm actually like I'm saying it into my notes as I'm typing, and like where it feels like I'm like, there's that hook, like you know, like
You're performing it.
That's where you like hit the next
Yeah,
for
it's
me.
that conversational thing and that ease.
Yeah, I mean, my only feedback is about repetition. Like, it's a device. Like, using repetition is a device, and that's meant to elicit something.
Yeah, that's his formula. I've never worked in that formula
Yeah.
before. Yeah,
Interesting. So you're just kind of experimenting with the
I've never done that
with
before.
the device.
The
That's cool.
emphasis.
I usually am way more freestyle.
Yeah,
when I write
like
poems.
the
I must
Raven.
confess, I did compress.
I would say be intentional with the repetition. Those are always huge.
Yeah,
That's it. Otherwise, I have no idea what you said because I need to see it in front of me. Something about craters. You're sad and unstable. That's what I got.
the yeah. Well, from here at the end of any road that you take, there's always a moon to look up at, and at the moon, the moon is nothing without a crater. It's the only thing that you see, right? So the crater is a mark upon the moon that is like the visual texture. Without that, there's just a big
There's no
white.
identifying.
There's no identifying
characteristic.
characteristic. It's just a bright light in the sky, like a star, but closer. But the crater gives texture. And without a crater, what is anything, right? Without a bruise, like what is anything? It's just a flat,
Without impact.
yeah,
Of some,
like
of
explosion
something
was a
else.
word that came to mind.
Without a history. Without.
So then,
John's trying to get on the On Being podcast.
so then when reaching, say you are in a dream and you have now climbed out of the crater, but you're on the moon, there's a vantage point of knowledge and wisdom that you've gained from being in the crater, right? Coming out and seeing that new vantage point. So things become clearer from that point of view. That's what I was trying to.
I think I got that feeling.
We get a snap.
Yeah.
There we go. Sick.
Is that when you're in the room with people doing the poetry, does that, I mean, I think I would laugh out loud if people started snapping around.
So
me.
yeah. So no, I mean, like,
Is it-
No, that's etiquette, man.
you're-
That's it.
Yeah, that's literally
expected
what
almost,
you do. Yeah. I mean, there's sometimes like, so the poetry community that I'm talking about is in New York, and like all New Yorkers, always rowdy. Like, there's some times where people will say a line, and like this one dude, his name's Hattress. He's like just like the biggest personality. He'll just be like, bars. Like, everyone will start cracking up, like from the back of the room all the way to the front. But like most people, yeah, like sometimes, like if the line is so good, they'll even be like repeat it, and then people will repeat it. It's pretty cool. It's actually a really interesting way of.
I'm just picturing like a stand-up situation, except it's poetry.
Yeah,
but there's the difference is that like people are connecting. I mean, it is the same dynamic, like a performance, right? There's audience and performer.
Yeah, I'm just picturing that room.
But
and
it's
that,
like because the poems are about them and it's so deep and personal, like these people, like, and usually the rooms I've been in, it's like an open
that's the
mic
norm?
situation where, what's that?
that's the norm where poetry is like this.
The ones
like,
I've been at, yeah. I mean,
it's
I don't know
not
if the
fictional.
norm.
It's like
No, it's very personal, you know? And so, and it's an open mic, so they'll get to do 2 or 3 poems and then another person will go. And like, you know, the community, you'll see the same people week over week. And it's great. I mean, people just developing their craft and giving feedback on certain lines. Like I said, like they'll be like, read that back. And people like clapping and laughing. I mean, it's cool.
what's David White's description of poetry?
language against which there are no defenses.
Yes.
So fucking good. So crazy.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah. And the Greek from which the word poetry comes from alludes to a kind of construction. It's like the building of a thing.
Yeah.
It's worth looking into. The Greek etymology of poetry. It was, man, I wish I had more of the detail of that one, because it's like between those two things, it's like I feel like I finally understand what poetry's for.
Yeah.
You know, in my whole life, I never. It's funny, like poetry I can enjoy, and I have not developed, because lyrics, I can have a lot of a lot of ideas and thoughts will arise from lyrics, especially when they're poetic. But it's in such a framework, usually in song, that it's sort of machine-like. Whereas the kind of poetry you'll read that isn't totally avant-garde has a sort of freer sense to it. It's not as rigid, and I always feel like it's an art form that I digest slowly and only ever partially, and I really enjoy it. John, I found your poem beautiful, but it's not the way I feel about most things I give feedback about.
Yeah.
Do you know what I'm saying? It's
Yeah.
like I don't have the aesthetic framework.
I was being a bit more
context.
rhetorical about that.
I get it. But I mean, we're just exploring this because I think there are other art forms where, paintings, for instance, I can go to the Broad and see things that I know are incredible and not have a rich perspective on, because I just don't have the history. I don't know the context. I don't know the artist. I don't know how it relates. I don't understand the relationships that it has to the world and to civilization.
Total side note,
culture.
but when I go to museums or galleries, I always go on a tour. Like I always have a guided tour so they can give that context, and it makes the experience so much better. Because then you can go back after the tour and then stand in front of it and develop those thoughts, because context is everything with art. I mean,
speaking of which, I found a new YouTube channel called Bandsplaining. Do you know this one?
No.
Okay, so the first one I watched, they're like little mini documentaries. And the first one I watched was about Silver Apples, the electronic music group from New York in the late 60s. This sort of inventing techno music with World War II oscillators plugged into guitar amps. And I knew the records from the 90s, like they were re-released on CD in the 90s and sort of reached a height of popularity that the band hadn't reached before. It was like very much an indie hit. And they got together and they toured again. It's a drummer and the dude who built like a big table of synthesizers.
Wow.
And various effects and a radio that he could dial in, like whatever was on the radio. And like, it's pretty nutty stuff. 2 albums they made, and he told their story and what happened after. The drummer formed this band called Suicide, which is an epic fucking electronic rock band from the 80s, like late 70s. Their first gig ever was the moon landing party in Central Park, like hippies going crazy, hugging each other like we're in a new era because we've reached the moon and we're a galactic species, and like what a crazy cultural moment that was. It just brought just that little bit of detail brings a lot of richness to what would otherwise be a sort of curious record you might hear playing on the Sonos here in the loft, right? And, this learning about things, learning the context, learning the story informs music so much. Just listening to music sort of as a sort of floating object in the universe is kind of a strange thing. It sort of goes to our thing about deep listening and like having tens of thousands of artists sort of go by their work going by your ear in like a few year period. Like there's just so much music in our lives. You don't have time to study any of them. There's just too many, right?
The Frank Gehry quote, is the work referential and iconic or in conversation with its surroundings?
Sure.
You can meet a record in isolation and it conveys stuff.
Incredibly, yeah.
Yeah, and
in its own right.
It meets you where you're at. And then there's a story and a context and a I was talking with someone about it the other day, about how, I get masters from people, young bands, and they're like, have you heard of My Bloody Valentine? It's like, yes, I've heard of My Bloody Valentine. You know, I was there for the first time round, and how in my mind, I was there for the original thing. I saw the shows and I bought the records the day they came out. And of course, you know, to people older than me, they'll say, well, yeah, but they took something from Wire or this German post-punk band or whatever. They, you know, in my mind, I was there for the first wave, but of course everything is built on stuff before, you know, so that context can definitely deepen an experience. But I don't know where I'm going with this, but I had an interesting experience once in Amsterdam. The first time I went to Amsterdam, I went to the Van Gogh Museum, and I guess it had been in one building, and I don't know what happened, or they were building the new Van Gogh Museum, so it was going to be amazing. But in the meantime, they took all of his work and sort of jammed it into this like completely non-ideal space. So what happened was the rooms were way small, they were painted the wrong color, and there was just fucking masterpieces everywhere. Like, imagine taking like a small hotel and just being like, we're just going to cover this shit in Van Gogh, right? And so it was quiet the day I was there, and I was coming around corners and just being like, what? like this painting has been in my brain since I was 5, and now it's just like it's on the end of the kitchen island, right. And you're like this is insane. So incredible experience, really connected with the art, the story, the whole thing, amazing. Went back to Amsterdam, I don't know, 2 or 3 years later, and they had finished the amazing, groundbreaking, I'm sure designed by some amazing architect, Van Gogh Museum, custom built to house this collection of work in Amsterdam. And it was awful. Everything about the experience was awful. They had built this 5-story thing, basically square or just ovals or whatever, around a central atrium that went up. Mm-hmm. And the day I was there, it was super busy. So they basically hung all of his work just around these floors, 5 floors, and these long sort of squares, but with a whole central atrium coming up.
The Guggenheim, but
I haven't been to the Guggenheim.
Okay.
Yeah, that's
so weird. Imagine like generic 5-story office building with a circle cut out in the middle of every floor. So like a cheap hotel, right? But white walls, pretty nice lighting. Yeah. But the experience was a bunch of people pushing past you in a never-ending corridor, and the noise of every person on 5 floors in your brain. It was awful.
I share that experience. I've been there.
Yeah.
It's cold.
Yeah.
Got out as fast as I could.
But it was that
park,
thing of like
Roger Scruton's nightmare.
Yeah. It was just wrong. You know, I'm sure mistakes were made, but it was amazing to me how incredibly I connected with this work when it was so jammed into an imperfect space. And it's like these moments when you meet art and you're not ready for it, and you're not in the right frame of mind, and it isn't the right place, and it wasn't introduced to you by your
so
cool friend.
Modest.
And it just, you know.
I had that experience last night. We were watching, there used to be a website called punkrockvids.com, and it was like high school era, before streaming, no YouTube. And this dude would just upload like full performances of bands, but cut out per song for bandwidth issues, because no one could download a 45-minute video then. All these bands that I was listening to, like indie, emo, punk bands.
Live sets or?
Live sets, like in Boulder, Colorado. I guess that's where the guy lived, and he like knew the venue, and so he'd set up a camera, like 2 cameras even.
Amazing.
And it was like these bands that were like just gotten signed, maybe first record or EP even.
Yeah.
And I would watch them and be obsessed. And Addison and I would watch them at his house, stoned when his mom was yelling at us, and that we were stoned all the time. And I found
she was right.
She was 100% right. I found a specific video that I remember us watching of Taking Back Sunday, first record, first tour even. And I remember like at the time, like being fucking blown away. I was like, this is the greatest band of all time. Like we would just like watch this on repeat. We played it yesterday and it was so bad, like so bad. Like I was like, how could, and I was just like, we're joking. And like, I remember this same exact time period, I'm telling my parents that I'm going to pursue music and that this is my favorite band. And I'm imagining them listening to what I'm hearing now.
That noise.
And being like, are you fucking kidding me? Like, are you out of your minds? Like, yeah, like we want to be just like this band. But it's so funny because at the time, I remember this specific video being like, this is the best performance. Like, this is what we're aspiring to be like. And then hearing it now, totally different, out of context, like not even remotely good. But it's amazing. Obviously, knowledge plays a role in that. Other influences, experiences, but just the context itself, just being young and in high school versus being old and not in high school.
Yes.
And it changes it.
And I think separate to that, if we sort of generalize, pull out for a second from we all have records that we love that we listen now, we're like, what was I thinking, right? But if you generalize and we go back to the poetry conversation, much like, the experience a couple of times I've seen Shakespeare in my life, the first 15 minutes you're like, I wish I hadn't done this. This is too much. I'm confused. I'm tired. It's been a long day. And then you sort of get into the rhythm. And poetry is like that. When someone comes at you with the pace of poetry, the sort of slow, thoughtful thing, and you're in the middle of a complicated, busy, noisy workday, it's like you're driving down the freeway at 80 and then someone brake checks you. It's like, I can't stop that quick. I can't get into poetry mode.
Right.
But you go and see people, like we used to have poetry events in my hometown, in the restaurant my mom used to work in, and pretty well-known poets in Ireland and England would come and read for 2 hours. And the first 15, you're like, again, this chair is uncomfortable, I'm cold, like I need a drink. And then...
They didn't snap?
There was no snapping. But then it would be this slow sort of winding wheel that would sort of build up momentum. And by the end of the night, it's like people are headbanging to this poetry. It's like, it's really... really,
mosh pits.
Yeah, but it's hitting people deeply because you're in sync with the poet, right? And some of them were great. It's interesting because I rarely get much from reading poetry, and I love listening to people read it. The poet reading it is much more meaningful to me than reading it off the page.
Absolutely, and I recall a time walking into a bookstore in New York and like I was standing and watching and I'm like, fuck, I can't stand for like 10 hours like watching this. And like 2 hours later, I'm still standing like just in it.
Yeah.
But I think partially, hearing poetry being read out loud, you have to be in a frame of mind for it. Be ready to receive it. And you're not going to be in the first 10 minutes or 15 minutes because of the pace of our lives. And because our brain is like, wait, words coming out of someone's mouth, they're usually at this cadence and like this tone, but it's not that, because it's almost like the same way people don't sing to you when they speak.
Yes.
It's like, this is another form of output that we're having out of the mouth that is different than speaking or singing. And so just calibrating that is takes time.
This adjustment period you're talking about isn't even a fixed thing. It's going to be different at different times of the day, just because of circadian reasons. And also it's this is what they found with expert meditators, meaning like monks who've got many, many years of every day, many, many hours, is this kind of concept of agility where you can switch gears like that at will. So, it's not, most of us, because of the routine of our lives and the pace of it and the state of our attention, will have varying degrees of adjustment whenever we're trying to like come down and focus and become open and sensitive and receptive. But it is trained through meditation. That agility to switch mind states, which is neurological agility.
Yeah. Well, there's no question. If you had to choose when to read me a poem or have a poet read me a poem today, it's like right after I got off my walk with Hector, wide open, been moving in the sunlight, the fresh air, thinking, talking with a new friend, great time to hit me with a poem. What do you got? And then, today, just before I left the house, it's like I'm cramming a master, finishing these very complex edits.
Hey man, I got a poem for you.
Yeah, exactly. It's like my brain is. I've got the clothes that I'm going to wear drying.
Hey John, this is David White.
Yeah,
I got a poem for your birthday.
So don't give it away.
It's going to be. It reminds me of, and it's just coming to me now how much this has influenced sort of my the things that I love. But when I was in college, I saw a poet. He's a very strange dude. His name was Pat Inglesby. And when we were kids, he had a TV show for kids called Pat's Hat that was kind of surreal. It was like a kids show. He was an older dude. And the show was kind of surreal. I never really connected with it. But he, when I was in college, he did a poetry reading, I guess, at a theater. And we went to see it. And it's a really simple thing. I just didn't know you could do it until I was 17 and I saw him do it. He would tell these incredibly funny stories. He's very vulnerable, frail kind of dude, had a lot of health problems. And he would tell these hilariously funny stories, sometimes kind of bawdy stories. And you would be just drawn in. The whole room would be laughing. And then he would just turn it. And the girl he was talking about that was so funny was a heroin addict. And she was homeless. And it would just twist and you'd be like, fuck. And he would get you with this crazy pathos. And he would bring you into this world and the story and the suffering and the thing and the thing. And then it's like, boom, it's all setting up a punchline. Yep. And it's true, but he just went back and forth. I was like, fuck you got me again, bro. And he just kept doing it.
That's like a stand-up too.
Yeah, it's like stand-up with that crazy power. And very weirdly, that show was kind of very influential in my brain. I mean, that's like a dream combo for me of like that kind of openness and rawness and humor. Like like if I could make creative things in the world that had that, that would be like the sweet spot, right? Like that. I'm always talking to you about Louis' TV show.
Yes,
it's that. Yeah. It was this like heartbreaking awkwardness and weird misadventures in dating and parenting, combined with like brilliant humor, just truly brilliant humor, and just back and forth and back and forth. Like that's my sweet spot, right? But anyway, years later, I was on a train. I used to take the train to college. It was like 50 miles. And I was on a train and the train almost derailed. We had a massive incident where, like all the bags fell off the railings and the train hit this massive piece of debris that had fallen off another train. And we were up on a tall embankment and it was very nearly a big train accident. And trains all fucked up and we're stuck in the countryside. And I went to get like tea in the whatever, the place where you get tea on the train. And I met him and we spent the whole 3 or 4 hours of waiting on the train just with him talking. And he was fascinating and hilarious and was doing the same thing in person that he was doing. He was like super thoughtful and open and vulnerable and hilarious and dark. And it was amazing, very sort of, I didn't realize until we were just talking tonight how much it sort of imprinted on me,
He definitely took language beyond your defenses.
Yes. Yeah. And just it's interesting because when we were doing, I'm jumping all over the place, sorry. We were doing the Oxford Union thing last week. I was telling you that there was an Irish lady who was speaking about what the Catholic Church had done in Ireland, Ireland's history with the Catholic Church and just how toxic it was. But she was talking about just how closed Irish society was, how repressed it was, that we didn't talk about human stuff. We didn't talk about miscarriages. We didn't talk about sexuality. We didn't talk about being gay. We didn't talk about loss. We didn't talk about depression. We didn't talk about alcoholism. It was like, everything was buttoned down. You didn't, So here was a guy who was drawing you in with humor and then just like putting all of the real stuff on the table. And it's like, wait, we can do this? We're in Ireland and we can
giving permission for other people to do
course.
It. Back to your...
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I guess it does, relate to that theme at the very top.
Yeah.
Like doing that in a softer way. Of course, you don't have to talk about homeless heroin addicts when you're tuning someone's studio. Yeah. But maybe the conversation goes there, who knows?
Priming yourself to give the space or allow for the space to be there in those sessions.
Yeah.
Whether or not it gets there.
I'm sort of excited about the idea of accepting the things I'm good at and using that space to give space to other people.
Yeah.
To sort of use my energy then to enable other people in this space to be freer.
I hear it as a kind of recognition that we're all influencing each other. and then taking that responsibility,
Yeah.
you know,
Lisa
to
Feldman
be
Barrett's
positive.
thing, interconnected nervous systems, you know,
Yep.
family life,
Yeah.
you know.
Mm.
That's a really tricky one, because raising kids, you're sort of like, those lines are very blurry about how much you need to take account of other people, how much you need to be self-assured in yourself and just be you even when it isn't easy, you know, but don't be you all the time to the point where you're fucking up the whole family, you know.
The balance.
Yeah. It's tricky stuff.
All this talk about poetry, it having the ability to cut, it is defined by the ability of language to cut through our defenses, to get right past them without our defenses having any reaction, any response. It's just automatic. It's like constructing keys that you put into somebody and turn it, and you just get the effect, you know? And I wonder, you know, we're talking about how much learning about something can inform and enrich a piece of art, and how it can be a blurry, like your experience of a piece of art can be blurry and not really very deep, but you learn things about it and suddenly it does that thing. You see what I mean? And so the poet is using words that they know are gonna, you know, have an effect on some broad audience, whatever the audience is, right? And it's as though, like, I mean, I don't think I need to make the case for like art education and like cultural education. I mean,
Maybe you do.
I think learning about things, you know, historical things, the way things have been done, how things relate to one another across time and space and cultures and all that sort of thing. It enriches our view of the world. It makes the world a more artful place, because your brain starts seeing connections and the metaphor and the overlap and what the Greeks were saying here and then what we were saying here 200 years after, you know, ago, and how that sort of relates, how it's all built on something, and how we're all part of like something much bigger than what we've had exposure to, a timeline much longer. You know, we're sort of part of something, you know, that we can't even comprehend. It's so much bigger than us, we can't even comprehend it. You know, sort of learning about things is part of developing an aesthetic language so you can appreciate more things generally, right? So the language that we've developed to talk about music and to or talk about design, it's like, okay, then now when we talk about movies, there's like a sort of an overlap. When we talk about food, there's sort of a wine. There's this sort of you sort of gain a broadly applicable skill in a way of aesthetic judgment. And I think like that's something I don't hear people talking about, like what they're doing to develop their ability to conceive of art. You know what I mean? As a deliberate thing. Like obviously there are people in art school, but I mean, I'm talking about in our community specifically, record making, Los Angeles, and the, you know, all the rest of us around the world. Yeah, I mean, that's why, you know, channels like this Bandsplaining channel on YouTube to me is so, I always dug the Silver Apples. Like them a lot more now. Like I like that music suddenly a lot better. Do you know what I mean? I never understood why that band didn't go past their second record, and the story is crazy. They got Pan Am to let them in a cockpit of a plane. Do you know the story, Graham? They got Pan Am to let them in the cockpit of the plane. It's them sitting in the pilot and co-pilot seat with all the dash of the plane and looking out over the runway and the Pan Am logo, which was in their deal. And they're like looking back. And on the back, it's a photo of them in the actual ruins of a plane crash. And so when this shit came out, the executives at Pan Am and the lawyers and shit went nuts. And they sent, like, they were attempting to confiscate all of their equipment until they got some kind of recompense for this situation, and they went into hiding. It's a totally insane story.
We talk about dangerous record making.
That's what I'm saying. That's a great, come on.
Right.
That's a crazy choice, bro. That's 1969.
That's
like,
great.
that's some crazy shit.
Yeah, and some seriously uptight dudes in suits, like old.
Yeah.
The patriarchy. They were not pleased.
Yeah, OG.
Yeah, the OG patriarchy.
Patriarchy was not well pleased.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, so like you learn, look, it took me 15 minutes to watch this thing, and now there's 2 Silver Apples records that I've even sampled that one of those records for a remix I did. Like that, I have history with that. My relationship to music is very deep with very few records, and they were certainly in the 90s, in the mid to late 90s. Like, it was very inspiring to hear people making pseudo techno, in 1968.
Yeah.
Pre-Kraftwerk, like before Kraftwerk's first show, where they did something similar. It was like drums and synthesizer. So I recommend that channel. I haven't watched it. Oh, the other one I wanted to mention that I watched after that was the Zamrock, like Zambian, African psychedelic stuff, and the whole story of that, how there was an emerging middle class and suddenly people had money to spend and suddenly you could do gigs at night and everyone was buying records 20 cents, and it was like a whole growing thing until the politics of the neighboring nations and it was like this 5-year period, and then how Egon or the re-releases of all these old records through Now Again, and tells the whole story of the whole thing, and interviews and talks to some of the only living members of those bands, because so many of them died during the AIDS crisis there. It's just such insane richness.
And we're like,
just a
have you
click
got
away.
Splice, bro?
That's
Seriously.
Yeah. It's a different world. It's a different world. It's like,
well, it's for survival purposes. Because you have to.
And it's art truly reflecting life, as opposed to the production line that we've sometimes sort of talked about, I was talking with Hector this morning about the image of a conveyor belt of songs coming down, and there's hundreds of songs, and the songs are squares, little squares.
Was this a nightmare you had last night?
No, it was
sounds like Fantasia.
a little dream.
He's been tripping now that everyone's out of the house.
I've started microdosing people
the entire time.
But there's this
mushrooms in the closet now.
And I'm like, here's this conveyor belt, and I was like, there's 400 songs on it, and they're all square, different size squares, but they're all square, and they're going past to be mastered, and there's a couple that are just the wrong shape. And I'm like, they're the ones I want. I'll take those. It's like, the other ones can go to Sterling. They can go to all our friends. I'll take the ones that are a little off, And we were just talking about that, about the kind of work we want to do. It was really interesting to talk to a younger person about how they're looking forward. Someone who has so much time. 27.
Not many craters on that dude.
Yeah, I mean, who knows what I don't know his life story. Maybe he's had tough times, but it was certainly uplifting to spend time with him. So I hope he gets to listen and knows how much I appreciated it. But yeah, it was just fun to riff on to listening back to last week's podcast when you said, hey, when you listen back to this, you'll hear that you said the kind of work you want to do. It was funny. It was funny to hear you reference that.
Speaking of the circle jerk that we have been known to give ourselves on this podcast, that's some of the feedback we've received
early on.
Yeah, I was in my car like playing the podcast, and I got to Addison's house, and I'm in the driveway, and I'm like, it was like 30 minutes. I'm like sitting in the driveway listening to us, and I'm like, all right, this is just weird. I gotta get out of my car.
Yeah.
I can just call these guys right now.
I'm like, I'm one of those guys.
I'm right here.
I can
I'm
record myself
right here.
if I want to hear myself.
It can be compelling.
I listen to it all the time.
Those guys are doing good things.
I gotta admit.
Yeah.
It sounds great in my new car.
Ooh.
Man, it's big.
Yeah.
And there's like two immersive settings.
Yeah.
Do you use one? I was
I
going
don't
to
like
ask
it.
you what your...
I have it set to standard. I don't like it.
I like the first one for talk.
Okay, I haven't tried for talk.
Check it.
Okay,
See what you think.
Yeah, I
I'm
didn't
just
dig- I didn't dig
curious.
it for music.
Do we have the same? We have the same brand card. Do we have the same? Is it the same
I think
software?
it's the same.
probably?
I think they haven't upgraded until the new models that are coming out this year.
I don't have the same stereo as you. I don't
No?
think mine is the older one. It's not that good in mine.
Oh, really?
Not that good, no. It's okay, but it's
Yeah,
not. You heard it, Spider. It's like, yeah, it's
I
okay.
don't know. I didn't notice.
Yeah,
I like
it wasn't.
I like
It's
mine
not
a
good
lot.
or bad.
I didn't really pay attention.
Good records sound good in it. Bad records sound bad in it. It's like PMCs, basically. It's PMCs on the road.
But I really like how this podcast sounds compared to other podcasts.
Same.
Oh yeah, no
I gotta
question.
admit.
All right.
No,
So we're gonna say Dylan's name so he can.
I mean,
deliver-
I
hear
like how
this.
things sound for a living.
I wanted
Yeah.
to jump. I want to same.
Well, we're gonna take it home, John. So take it home on something.
Oh, are we?
Well, we're at 2 hours.
Yeah,
So
but-
I was going to
closing
jump back to
poem?
something you said about the conveyor belt and you
Oh,
wanting
cool.
the what?
No, I said, oh, cool.
yeah.
You wanting those records. Like, I'll speak for myself, but I feel like I gravitate towards people like that. The relationships that I find strongest are the odd ones out. For better or for worse. Sometimes I just kind of want a square in my life, and you're talking about the perspective of your choices and taste in mastering a record. It's like that's just who you are. It's like why you're in my life. You're just so weird.
Just a weirdo.
You're just a little weirdo
Yeah,
that wants
yeah.
the weird records,
Yeah,
and like,
excited by. It's there's obviously more to that conversation,
I
but
think it's just evidence
the-
of thoughtfulness.
I'm skirting around something that I'm not ready to necessarily talk about, but just the idea of like little weirdos really resonate with me.
Yeah.
I don't know how smart that is for longevity, but
well, I mean, the
when
reality.
it comes to career too, I just don't know. I mean, a bunch of square records paving the way to do a couple of triangle-shaped records is probably a.
there's a
I said
good balance
records.
there.
That's a Looney Tunes reference
Yeah.
somewhere in there.
There's a very good case to be made for that. It was a very simple image, but
There are also
on
very
the-
many dimensions of weird.
yeah,
Because weird is sort of just a way of saying uncommon, right? It's,
Yeah.
It's like...
O.G. Voltaire are weird.
Yeah.
In the pop music space,
Yeah.
they're making bangers, but they're a little weird.
Yeah, it's a little weird.
Yeah.
It's dope.
But in terms of people, yeah, you're talking about another one of these tensions that doesn't go away, which is dependable, predictable, square, on time, predictable Christmas gift. People are less interesting than colorful, creative, dangerous, oddball, potentially late, thoughtful, give
Potentially
feedback when you don't
disruptive.
want
The
it.
same is true of
artists.
poetry.
Yeah. There's some of the most exciting people. I'm thinking of one person in Ireland who is one of the most funny, most, beautiful men you could ever imagine.
More
He's-
beautiful
he's-
than Matt Rad.
Matt's sort of cut from the same stone as this
The
guy.
same
But-
what is it? Atlassian?
Atlantean?
Atlassian.
But,
Atlas.
but Matt has nothing in common with this guy in terms of. So this guy is like, if you're a moth, he's the light. He's just so
This better be the intro.
compelling and interesting to be around. But he is literally a tornado of a human. He's just going around the world breaking businesses and people and relationships, and he's a chaos machine. He is a crazy maker. But when you're opposite him, you just want to be in his crazy. And so there's a cost to being around people like, great artists. Many of the greatest artists are incredibly difficult people to be near. But they're also incredibly compelling, flawed, beautiful humans, right? So I don't think that will ever change.
Charisma is not a prerequisite for making art, I guess.
Not charisma, but there's, interesting, creative, dangerous, unpredictable people are sometimes hard to be near.
Yeah.
And I suppose you want a balance. You'd like the guy doing your taxes to show up on time and be square. And maybe when you're making a record,
Your Honor.
yeah, you'd like the person to be a little dangerous, but you don't necessarily want to live with that person. You know.
No.
Um.
No, I guess no, you don't.
So. Yeah, I don't want to end on that note.
You guys want me to tell a joke I'm writing?
John's got another poem.
I got another
to
one.
take us out.
Outro poem?
Outro poem.
This is a bit more reflective of the free form. We can cut these out if nobody thinks they're good, or if Rory says I don't understand it again.
I don't have to understand it to like it.
This is
That
this
was
is-
not a note.
Same.
This is
Yeah.
from a bit ago. That's a good note. It's a good note. This is from a bit ago. It's about kind of a head down approach to what most creatives seem to do, and not necessarily taking time to lift their head up and see what's around them or what they could be missing. And I called it the current. How do I read this? Strong like ice, the earth in its grasp, a stream of fire running through, drenched in salt, bathed in stone and clay, fertile and fluid, night and day. In its wake, visions of regret begin to reflect all the neglect. What good is a mountain if you can't stop to breathe its lucid air? What good is an eagle if it's unaware of its wingspan? At the aqueduct, there's a forged intimacy. Panting and treading, a thirst for solid ground grows like wild grapevines. Malleable and permeable, the ability to be changed by pressure. Tenacity turning to a brave surrender, reaching out to grab hold, gasping for fresh light, a mineral reborn. Period.
I like that one. I understand that more.
Yeah.
Probably because you gave a little preamble, but
Well, I thought we'd build context into
Yeah, we
the
learned
poetry
about
club.
it first.
yeah.
Yeah. The other poem was for context. What we just were talking about is realizing living with the unstable is very, very difficult, and it can be attractive. But
That too is what I was referencing.
yeah.
My conversation also took place in this context.
Anyway, that's another poem. Since I
Look
was
at you
on
reading
that.
poems on the
I
podcast.
know, man. Homie's in it.
Michael's writing a fucking book. You guys are raising the bar here. I feel like I'm a lobster in a
cut it
pot.
out.
The
Don't
water, the
compare.
water's
Just
cooking
live.
slowly.
Don't compare.
Really,
No.
the way that I would
No,
prefer, would have preferred to express myself this evening to the conversations world would have been through the menu item that I had planned for tonight. So we'll pause that idea and bring it back next week, maybe before I fly out to New York the day after that. Maybe it'll be a nice send off
It sounds good.
for a week in NYC
Ooh.
with my new away weekender bag that
Yeah.
Spider and Rory got me for my birthday this year that arrived today. It's very thoughtful, very
What do you get a man who
Very-
has everything?
Something to put everything in.
It's actually called. It's not.
That's really
It's not
good.
their weekender model. It's called their everything
Thank
bag.
you.
Oh, no way.
So I think that's my.
Oh, that's great.
I think that's the best I got tonight as far as poetry goes.
The gold bag,
Yeah.
passport, and stacks of cash.
But I did. That's what I asked myself when we were trying to figure out what to get John. It was like, what do you get a man who has everything? Oh, the everything bag.
That's wild. I didn't know that.
It just leapt out of the internet.
Today is not a day where I feel like I have everything. So I hope that day comes roaring like the river that I depicted in the poem that I just read.
Yeah. Well, that's where you're at. And thanks for sharing it.
Yeah. Thanks for listening.
Sort of we went a lot of places. Was that clipping or clicking or
Snapping.
This is the
snapping?
sound of a clock.
Snaps.
A clock. Oh, I thought it was like horses,
That was the sound of a clock.
like Monty Python horses.
Is this
Coconuts.
the start of a poem? Another one?
Yeah.
A freestyle? No. I'm not.
What does that look like on the page?
I think we're gonna have to save our audience from our brains.
know. Jesus.
We went a lot of different places tonight. A lot of
Yeah.
weirdly shallow dips into different pools. I think
Really
That we-
interesting.
that they're themes that we're exploring or themes that we're uncovering or a lot of new stuff. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, man. I made a post the other day on the story that was like, I feel like I'm just feeling more comfortable on mic. And I think it's sort of this convergence of actually getting more comfortable on mic, like doing this thing, and then also just like learning and integrating more and more about myself and the things I like to do and the ways I like to contribute.
Outside of the podcast, you mean?
Yeah.
And then just
And
bringing,
inside. Yeah, exactly. But I think like people, the podcasts form, or like the people that form this podcast, the podcast form should reflect it. I've been saying that, from day one. Well, from when I started talking about form. And this feels like that. This feels like us in progress, and it's where we're at today.
Yeah, I mean, the last couple of weeks were like that. We're very heavy about my work stuff, and several different people reached out, about it. And like some people just like, are you okay, bro? And other people like, hey, that really meant something. I'm thinking of something similar or whatever. But more than that, it's really helped me move through some of the stuff, to talk about it with you guys. And like we said a couple of weeks ago on mic, if we had to carve out 3 hours to sit with each other each week and eyeball each other and just no phones, no bullshit, like it's very hard for any four friends to do that anywhere in the world.
Yeah.
When you're not 15.
Yeah.
So like we're very lucky to have this as a place to and increasingly capturing little ideas during the week. You're reading books and thinking, what's useful here that I can bring to the table? Spider's learning stuff, John's reading stuff, writing stuff. We're all sort of, it's become this sort of focal point for our week, for our thinking and our listening and our learning and our questioning, I guess.
It becomes more valuable each week, honestly. Like it's a funnel for our ideas and philosophies to emerge and be picked apart, and
where our flaws get checked and corrected.
It's the value of it, I feel like, has just increased over time in my mind. Not that it actually changed, because the form of it hasn't changed, the function of it hasn't changed, but the function has been revealed to me over time.
You were it took you longer to get comfortable with it, I think. It's funny because I don't yet, like, I just got an email from an old friend from Ireland the other day. I wrote him probably in November to check in, like, because of COVID. He's a live sound guy, probably 90% live, 10% studio. So I was like, "Are you okay, bro? Like, I haven't heard from you, And he wrote back the other day.
Wow.
We're not, close, as in we hang every day, but we used to hang out when we lived in Ireland and did projects together. And but someone I haven't spoken to properly, the last time he was in LA like 5 years ago, and we hung out, and you're trying to sort of write in a paragraph or a couple of sentences what the podcast means to me. So it's like you say to someone, I've got a podcast with some friends. And then it's like, this has been the most important creative work I've ever done in my life. No, that sounds weird. You should check it out. No, like what? Well, how do you describe what we're doing? So and the guy would reply like, so you have a lot of listeners? It's like, not really. So why is it important? Well, like, it's hard to describe.
It can't be important if you don't have a lot of listeners.
It's important to me because of the thinking and the questioning.
I mean, life being made better by people getting together and talking. Like, it's so obvious and basic. And
I suppose.
Fundamental. It's like sort of like,
it's ridiculous.
It almost doesn't seem remarkable in that moment. I know what you mean.
It seems like a return to form of where we used to be as humans, and something we've lost. And I mentioned it somewhere, maybe on a live or something. It feels like a demonstration of what's possible with people in this world. Like, we used to be tribal and in a group and speaking with each other regularly, or grunting at each other regularly, whatever they did, but
mutually invested in each other's well-being.
And this is sort of like a more modern take on a classic look.
But that isn't encapsulated when you say to someone, you got a podcast. It's like saying, well, I got a rice cooker too. It's like, I got the new iPhone. It's like I got one of those modern accessories. Doesn't everyone have a podcast now? That doesn't capture.
It's a marketing accessory.
It's way more than that, and I haven't found the language yet to describe it. And
part of the project.
Yeah, but I'm grateful to have it, and I had fun tonight.
always.
Yeah.
Till next week.
Peace out. All right. Thank you. Good night, guys.
Good night, man.
Conversations is produced and mixed by Dylan Seals. The Conversations theme was performed and recorded by the Hazelrick Brothers.